the lecture. So at this point, this is a section where you have to have UV your face. You can't skip that and do this and then do UV, because we're going to be kind of painting on your face. So if you go up here in the workspace, we're going to go and switch to XGen. And this tab will actually want to have our outliner docket right here. And I want my toolkit. Tool settings, because we'll be using these two settings for the hair. XGen is kind of fickly, it has problems, so you really have to make sure that you are constantly saving your project, and also you have to set your project for XGen to work. So just to go over this again, you have to either first go to project window and do new, and then create a project folder for your self-portrait, and then set it. Go file, set project, and select that folder that has mainly this workspace mail, but it'll be creating like XGen information. So you need to have all these folders already pre-created. So just go and select the self-portrait or whatever you're calling that project. So that is a must before you start working on the hair. So now what we'll have to do is we're going to create a new description. So have your face selected. Actually, first, before we do that, delete the history. We want to have fresh history on this, nothing. So right here, delete history, or edit, delete by type, history. We want everything to be completely fresh with this model. Now what we're going to do is to create a new description, and we're going to be calling this description is kind of like what part of the groom we're going to be doing. So if you're going to do multiple things, so like if you're going to do hair and beard and like peach fuzz, you're going to name those differently. So for this one right now, we're going to call it hair underscore description. The collection, and this is like what all these descriptions will be going into. So it's kind of like the main folder. So it's like the object or like the character. So for this, you can do like self-portrait collection. And these first two tabs, we'll be using the first one. We're going to be using splines for long hair and random across the surface, but we will be placing and shaping these guides. So it's for this, we have to name our description. So I'm calling it hair description. We have to name our collection. So I'm calling it self collection. And then we're choosing splines, random across the surface, and place and shaping guides. So then we go and press create. So let's go and save now, save as. So if we're looking at the outliner, we can see that this self collection is created. And in it, here's the hair description, and right here will be where our hair guides will be put down. So if you select see your face, and so we go into this XGen folder, there's a bunch of different little icons that we'll be using. We'll mainly be using this one right here to add more guides. So if you click on this and click on our head, this thing right here is created. And this is a guide. So this is kind of telling the software kind of how the hair will look and what direction it's going to be going in. So you can see that we can create multiple guides along the head. And you can see that each time we create a guide in this right here, it's creating these guides. And we can easily adjust these by, we can rotate them, we can scale them. If you want to move them, it's, hold on one second. While we have this selected, it's middle mouse and I think control. And you can see that we can move this along the face. With this right here, add more guides, control, and middle mouse at the same time. We can adjust where we want to place these guides. Guides will be created. They're not always going to be parallel, perpendicular with the mesh. It's going to interpolate between the next guide. So you can see that if I take this guide right here and scale it up a lot and rotate it this way, the guide I place right here will be half of both of these. Does that make sense to everyone? So Catherine, we go up here in this workspace right here. And it's normally default Maya Classic. I'm going and selecting XGen. Do you have any more questions? Are you following along? Okay. So what I'm going to be doing is I will be adding a bunch of these around my head. In the vicinity where I think my hair should be. Okay, so these aren't the actual hair follicles. They're just guides. So they kind of represent how your hair will look and like act when we actually view them. You can view your hair by clicking this button right here, and you can see that when I click on it, just a few will pop up. If we want to add more, all we have to do is density right here is set to 1. We can just have to just crank that up. You can see that the density is maxed out at 100, but you can always go overboard. So you can type in more than that 100. So right here, I just typed in 1,000, and now I have 1,000 hair follicles. And you can see that they're all about the same height, and they all will kind of then go and follow to that that guide. So we can turn off them by clicking on this button, view them again by clicking on this one. Any questions so far? Cool. So if you want to delete them, you can easily select the follicle that you don't want and just press delete, and it's going to delete that follicle. You can also go in the outliner and select it that way and delete it again. We don't want to be messing around with length right here, this primitive attribute. Length should always stay at 1. If you want your hair to be longer, the best way is just to select the hairs and scale them up. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete these few right here, and I'll add some more around my head. And what I'll do is I'll just go and lights, show, lights. I'm going to turn off my lights, and I'm going to hide. Oh, this is fine. Hide my lights and camera. Now I'm just going to go and select the hair. I think should go a little bit longer. My top of my head is longer than the back and side. I'll take some of these, scale them up a little bit longer. Take this one. So now when I turn on the eyeball and see what it looks like, you can see that now I have longer hair at the top, shorter hair at the bottom. I can adjust how they move. I can rotate them. Or if I go up into this XGen right here and select the sculpt guide, holding B will make it a little bit longer, and this is how you can kind of adjust and sculpt how your hair will kind of flow more naturally. So you can see that as I move them, You can see kind of it. So if you select a few, so let's say I select just these right here and go back into the sculpt tool, I can only affect those that I have selected. So sometimes it's good to have some selected and some not. It's kind of up to you and how you want to start kind of like painting and sculpting your hair. The best thing is to start low and work up. I kind of added a few too many. I should have had a few less. It's going to take me a little bit longer, but it allows me to kind of get a little bit more control as I start sculpting this hair. But you can see that when I turn on the view, it kind of looks like hair, but it kind of doesn't look like hair. Hair actually kind of like tapers. What's the hotkey for changing the radius of the brush? So the hotkey for changing the radius of the brush is if you hold down B and you move left, hold down B and left mouse click and drag left or right, it will increase or decrease. We'll get to facial hair later, but like you can see that when I mentioned the different descriptions, I called it hair. You'll have to go back after you do the hair and create another description for the facial hair, and you'll be just doing just the facial hair or just like that. So instead of you'll have multiple descriptions. So one for hair, one for eyebrows, one for facial hair. So that's the difference. But right now we're just working on hair, so that's why I named the description hair. Does that make sense? How do you select the guides? Select the guides by clicking right here. This is how to add them. You can just select them by just with the object mode on, just selecting. You can select them or drag, select them. Did that answer both of your questions? I'm going to make you host, Catherine, and can you share your screen? Okay, so you missed. If you go right here, request control. Did you save? Let's go. It could be because your face isn't UV'd properly. So the problem is it's doing is it's putting itself. It's going to put itself on the UV coordinates. So let's go and just do automatic map for right now. And you have to make sure that placing and shaping guides are on. I'm not sure if you had that selected. Great. Can you try opening up Maya again? Let me know when you get Maya back open and load the most recent file. Okay, anyway, going back. So right now we have our hair, and it's all uniform. If we go down into primitive attributes, taper, we're going to want to add a taper to it. So rule of thumb, I kind of like 0.8, and the taper start. If it's set at 0, I kind of like it to be a little bit further along. So at like between taper right here, we want to make the hair pointed like normal hair would be. So I kind of like having it at 0.8. It's a good default. We can adjust it later along, but taper start point between like 0.6 to 0.8 is good. We can do like 0.75 right now. The width is something that you want to adjust. So this right here is very thick. It's a little too wide. So if we reduce it's all like all of this is all determined on how big your object is. So it's all not going to be the same amount, but you can start playing around with what it looks like on yours, and then we can start increasing the density and kind of seeing how it looks. But this is starting to look a little bit more like hair. Just going to turn them back off. I'm going to go back right here and continue to start like just it doesn't have to be like completely on the mesh, as long as it looks good. That's all we really want to care about. It's more substance over style, like style over substance. Like we don't want it to be 100% realistic. This is an artistic project, so we can kind of like fake how the hair is going to kind of flow around. You can notice that sometimes you'll get hair in sections where you don't want the hair to be. So you can see that I have hair on my cheek, and even though I didn't put down those markers, it's getting placed down there. So what we have to do is we have to create a density mask. And right here, this section right here, all we have to do is click on the little arrow and create map. And we'll call it hair, like density mask. Map resolution, we can leave it at 5. If you want more resolution, you can add a little bit more. But what it's doing is we're going to be creating a UV map that's going to be on the mask. And if you need more resolution, between like these boxes, we don't need like that fine for what we're doing right now. So 5 is perfectly fine. So we'll go and create the mask. So this is the issue. Sometimes it has problems. Um, Okay, for some reason it looks like it just doesn't want me to have any special material on it. So what I did was I just went and created just a normal Lambert, and I went and right here, create mask. We can call it density mask 1, create. And what we want to see is it's going to create a white mask on our face. And in Maya, white will show the mesh, like will show something, and black will hide. So right here you can see in color, I have it on black. And I'm going to hide my hair right now and show you. I'm going to start painting on the head where I don't want hair to show. So you can see I'm doing this around here. If you hold Control, you'll be removing, you'll be painting the opposite color. So right now I have black as my main color, but if I hold Control, I can paint white. And when you scroll down in the tool settings, there's going to be a file texture. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to save the texture. So we're going to click Save Texture, and then go over into the generators next to the mask and save it again. So you can see that when I did that, now I masked everything out of where it shouldn't be. However, you can see that there's some few like hair around like this area where I thought I put black on it. It's probably what it is. It's like it's like nearly 100% black. So what you have to do is just go back and repaint those sections. It's actually a little bit better once you do that again to use the black with no feather. So you won't have a weird feather. So you can see I'm just going back again and just trying to make sure there's no...
If you have a second, I'm having an issue where I got the texture to work, but I'm not able to paint on my mesh.
Okay. Save texture. Again. There. So let's go, and I'm going to make your host. So can you share your screen?
Give me a second. I'm on my Mac today. I have to allow permissions and all that stuff. I'm gonna be right back because I apparently have to quit Zoom.
Sure. So you can see that like XGen, it works, but it has issues. It like you really need to like maybe play around with a few things. Sometimes if it doesn't work, you might
I'm
just
back.
have to, you might have to just like turn Maya off and load it back in. Sometimes that fixes some of those issues.
So as I just click and drag, nothing happens. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, and system preferences again.
Issues with my Macs.
Yeah, this isn't my main computer. This is my main computer's rendering our midterm.
Sure.
Okay, try that again. Okay, cool.
No, no. What? Is your face locked?
It shouldn't be. I've been editing it up to this point. My face is full underscore face underscore final. Just below where your mouse is.
Nice.
Should I just restart Maya?
Maybe because right now I can't select anything. You see, like I'm trying to move this left.
Yeah.
Can you try and move that left?
That's weird. That's a new one. Let's restart Maya.
Okay.
I might also want to open my previous save, which was just the hair before the mask, and then try again from there.
Yes.
I think we'll try that. Okay. 3. There we go. I need to unassign that material because
Yeah.
it's a really complicated material. Mask, create map, just create whatever name it wants to be. It works. Okay.
So you can see, like, sometimes it's weird. The
Yeah.
XGen just has issues. So that's why I've
Cool.
been saying, like, constantly, like, before you do any, like, next step, just save, because it might just not work, you know?
Yeah. Cool.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yep.
Stop share.
And now make me reclaim host.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. So when you want to go back into, so let's say right here, you're working on it and you think it looks good, and you realize you have a few faces that have hair through it, and you're like, oh shit, like, oh no, how do I get back into the paint it? All you have to do is in the mask, right next to it is the paintable textures. That's how you get back into the black white, and then just try and fill in those spots where you might be seeing some hair. Save the texture, and then resave it and see if it fixes that issue. What we can also do is isolate the object. So select the object and press isolate, and then turn it back on. And this is, you can see it's a little bit easier to pan around in spots where you really can't get to as well. Just inside the ear, panning in the back right here. It might be easier. So when you create the map, you can choose the starting color as black, white, or gray. Gray is 50%. White is see-through. So it might be easier just to do black and paint where you want your map to be. Since it might be a little bit less of an area. It's depending on what you're doing it for. So, and you can see if I hold down Shift, I can blur this. So I can blur it 50%. I'm just going to ignore those, but you can see that now we can choose exactly where we want our hair to be. Does anyone have any questions about that so far? Sweet. All right. So let's say you want to add a part in your hair. You might just go and think, well, all I have to do is create a bunch of these and adjust how they flow. So let's go and try and do that. Going to go this one right here. We'll notice that it's kind of difficult to do this. Well, there's another mask that we can use to create parts or sections in it, and all you have to do is go and scroll down, and it's this region control mask. So similar to the density mask. The region control mask, all we have to do is go and click on the arrow, create mask. And we can do region mask. And start color, red, green, blue. Red's fine. I'm going to create. And now I have a red mask around it. And next what I'll do is I'll go into the color and choose one of these primary colors. So let's go and choose green. And hide this. Same thing. Go and save texture. And save the mask. So now you can see that we now are starting to Oh, sorry. One more thing. In region mask, you have to turn it on. So change it from 0 to 1. And now you can see we have sections of our hair. So wherever these follicles fall along that mask, it will create a different. It'll tell those sections to go in that direction. So that will allow you to easily go and create like a part in your hair if you want to have one, or different sections in your hair. And clicking the eyeball will update your hair. Does anyone have any questions about that? Cool. So you can have multiple sections if you want. For me, I only have two. And all I have to do is add a third, like, significantly different color in that part. So we go right here. You can, instead of choosing green, we can go and choose blue and draw that like on another section, and any hair right there will have its own little like section that it runs from. Okay, now we're going to be messing around with modifiers. Modifiers will kind of make your hair look a lot more naturalistic. Because right now, our hair looks extremely uniform. It doesn't look anything too special. When we're working with the modifiers, I typically turn off the guides. This shows and hides the guides. It'll help you kind of figure out what your hair will look like a little bit easier without seeing those large guides throughout it. So when you create a modifier, you go over to the modifier tab and click on the little plus sign. And here's a bunch of different kinds of modifiers. I'm not going to go into every single one. But I will go into clumping. Clumping is one of the modifiers that I use significantly to make realistic hair. If you ever look at your hair, it kind of ends up in like some sort of small clumps. They kind of all like will merge together. So what I did was I created clumps, then I go to set up maps, and this is pretty much right here. Density is what we'll be messing around with. So if you had any sort of like specific stylized hair, you can generate your clump guides where your guides are located, so they'll follow along those guides. If you go and click on guide, I typically just go and just do generate and do a normal like density. Let's start off with like 20. I'm going to generate 20 might be a little bit. 5, generate, and I go and save. And you can see that my hair is starting to clump up into these sort of clumps. And even like doing one clump, my hair is starting to look significantly more realistic. You can see that like your hair is kind of like creating groups. And this clumps scale will kind of help. You can mess around with them so it's not all completely uniform. You don't have to have them all clump up to like a tiny point. You can adjust that. You can adjust the root and tip. So R is root, T is tip. I kind of like adding some noise to each one. So you can see noise. I can do like 1. Noise frequency, we can do like 1. So we can like increase them like a small amount. But if we go back into primitives, this modifier CV count is normally set to 5, and 5 is okay for like very short hair, but for longer hair, you'll want to have more CVs. So if we go in back to 20, go to 20, you can see that we're adding more points in those guides, and it allows you to adjust them a little bit more and have these modifiers affect them significantly more. So if we can go back to modifiers, we can go to like noise frequency. Let's say if we go to like the 10, you can see that it's waving significantly throughout the hair. Noise, we can go like the 5. So you can see you can do a lot of crazy things by increasing these values. If I go back into primitives and change the modifier count back to 5, you can see how it like reduces it significantly. So whether you want to start adding more noise to your hair or like interests, this increasing the CVs will definitely improve those qualities. And you can do a lot of, like, you can add clumps. So what I typically do is I'll add like 3 or 4 different clump groups on top of this. So you can stack these like over and over again. So first clump 2, so I can do set maps again. So instead of 5, I can do like 10. Generate. I have right there. Save. So you can see that it's adding more and more interest and realism into your hair. We can go back into clump effects. Go back to primitive. So instead of having 200 density, we can maybe bump it up to 500. Just get more in our hair. Go crazy, you can go back into clumping, maybe just do set maps, density, generate 2 for this one, generate, save. If you don't like it, you can easily turn it off. Move it around. If I want to move this down further, so make this like the first one. Let's see how that affects it. But normally at the end, what I do is I add a noise. And you can adjust how much you want it, the noise to be, but I find that like the noise at the end makes your hair feel more naturalistic. So we can adjust. Some of these settings just to figure out what exactly feels the most naturalistic. One last thing that I kind of forgot to mention. So we're going to turn back on the guides. So if you select the guide, let's go and isolate it, and right-click guide control points. Default, it's only 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's fine for short hair, but if you have longer hair, you're going to want more iterations. So at any point, we can go and rebuild these guides. So if you go right here into the primitive attributes and primitives, there's a rebuild. And we can then choose how many CVs we want on a single curve. So you can see that now when I chose 10, I have a lot more control of this guide. Any questions so far? All right, cool. So that kind of wraps up the hair. But before we can send this to render, we're gonna have to do a few extra little things. Go and so before we start rendering the hair, we have to go to preview/outputs. And under render, default will be none. And all we have to do is change this to Arnold Renderer. Go to File, Export Patches for Batch Render. Let me double check this. Yeah, File, Export Patches for back render, and then just export the file. What it does is it makes sure that what you see on the screen is exactly what is going to be rendered out. So once again, it's under Preview, Output, Render. We want to choose Arnold Renderer. It normally is set none. And then go to File, Export Batch Patches for Batch Render. So now we can go to Arnold, go to Render. And we can see that everything that we have in our viewport is now being rendered exactly in our renderer. However, the hair that is default isn't really the best. We're going to want to use the Arnold's hair. So in the outliner, we want to go and select the hair, this folder right here. Type in AI standard hair. Instead of surface shader, we want to use the AI hair. Select the hair disk, and then assign material to selection. So, the attribute that we will be changing for the hair is the melanin. So, black is 1, and as we slide through it, it changes the color, and 0 is white. I think there is a melanin scale. So you can see that here's kind of a range. So if you have like 0.5, it's kind of a medium brown hair. Sometimes if it doesn't work, if the hair's not working properly, if you click up update full screen, it'll clear out the cache and it'll fix kind of how the hair looks. If we increase the hair is kind of noisy. You'll have to increase the specular value in the Arnold renderer to something like 4 or 5. The hair is a very shiny, like material, so it's just the specular needs to be increased a significant amount to make it look half decent. If it's a little too shiny, you can like reduce the roughness or increase the roughness if you need it more shiny. So it's kind of up to you how you want the hair to look. But I would suggest to use the AI standard hair. But you can see that it's going to increase my render time. So that's a thing that you should kind of mess around towards the end once you have everything kind of set. So, okay. You can go and add the hair follicles for the eyelashes. I kind of would suggest to create your own eyelashes. And what you can do is go and create some splines. So I went and created a spline. And shape your spline to be like a single strand of eyelash. Then go and create a cylinder. Go to the deform, nonlinear flare. Select the cylinder, shift select the curve to form curve warp. Reduce the radius. Increase the then increase the subdivision heights. So now you have a tube that follows along, and then if you go into the flare, you can change kind of how it starts and ends, and adjust kind of how you want your eyelash to look. And if you kind of like how it is, you can go and freeze the histories. You can duplicate it and kind of just then assign the hair material to it. There, you got your eyelashes. You can do the same thing with the eyebrows, but your eyebrows, you could maybe it might be easier to do a new X-Gen hair system. So to create description, you can do eyelash description, put in the self right there, and then you're going to start all over again by creating the eyelashes, or if you want to do facial hair, doing the facial hair. But it's the same exact setup with the hair as then with the eyelashes or facial hair or whatever you want to do. You just have to go and create a new description for those new hair types. So that's it for making a self-portrait. I want you guys to render out a single 1920 1080. It doesn't really have to be 1080 as long as your longest length or height, longest side is 1920 resolution. You can make it 1920 by 1920 or 1920 by 1080, 1920 by 1200, as long as it looks like a good composition. I would suggest rendering it in landscape portrait. Since we're rendering a portrait, you don't want to use up a lot of dead white space. So that's what we'll be going over tomorrow. Next week, we'll be going over your final, and then I'll be giving you a critique on them, and then the following week is when everything is due. Anyone have any last questions?
Yeah, I had a couple.
Yep.
The first one I wanted to ask was, you mentioned back when we turned in our other project that we would be getting like an email with first our grade in it for that project, and then things we could do to improve it.
Sorry. Yeah, I have it all written down. I just forgot to send those out, so I'll do that tomorrow.
Okay. And like you said, so next week will be like for this project. It'll be like our last feedback, and then it's due the next week.
Correct. It'll be like the midterm. So like, bring whatever you have. It's not going to be your final grade. You can always change things if you want to change things, but it's a good like review of it.
Okay.
And the last day will be a 15-minute individual look at all your projects and give you your grade that day. Any other questions? Well, if not, I will see you guys next week.